station where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.
So a big hand to Neil Gellis Ward. So aliens on the moon. I did do another talk a few years ago for Changing Times. What was it? I forgot what it was.
Fairies.
Fairies. Encounters with fairies, ghosts and spirits. So that's my other kind of interest, is spirits and ghosts and things like that. But I also have an interest in UFOs and aliens and things. I always wondered, are there really aliens, or is it some sort of scam that we're being led down the road to believe? I don't know. I can't prove there's aliens. I can't prove there's aliens on the moon. I can't prove there's ghosts. I'm just really interested in the whole subject. So I started to look into the whole idea of the moon landings and the moon and the stars and astronomy as a kid. And obviously with the advent of the internet, I've done a lot more research since. So I did this talk a number of years ago at Hoboken Paranormal Meetup Group, where I used to run a group similar to this. And I think Andy himself came and did a talk there as well, didn't you? Amongst other people. And we didn't get many people, but it was still a nice little group. And obviously COVID came along and shut a few things up. It's been a bit quiet since. So anyway, can anyone tell me, a little quiz here, what's the 18th letter of the alphabet? Let's work it out. Anyone? R? R, that gentleman? Anyone? Anyone else? All convinced it's R? All agreement? Okay, say R. A bit louder. Louder. Say again. There we go. Ah! See, a bit of emphasis. That's before I was abducted. Do you know, I actually remember this photo being taken, ironically. I think this must be about 1965. I was probably about 8 or 9 months old, something like that. So I do remember being sat on the sofa and this weird man come along. I didn't even know it was a camera, but I just had to look at him with something. And it was just a vague memory. And we dug this photo a few years ago, so I've kept it. I must kind of tidy it up in Photoshop. But I'm just going to give you a brief history of myself, certainly when we get into the real heavy stuff, so you know where I'm coming from. I grew up with that motley crew there, so I'm one of 5 boys. So, do you know which one the oldest is? Any ideas? Okay, I'll go from the ages, okay? The oldest is this one, that's my dad. Then that's Simon, okay, my oldest brother. Then there's Russell, who's 18 months older than me. Then there's me. Now he looks the oldest, doesn't he? But that's Phil, my younger brother. And then that's Jason, my youngest brother. So I've got my artistic skills, which I'll talk about as well, from my dad, who used to be a technical illustrator for an aircraft company called Martin Baker. He used to do the ejection seats. He used to do all these technical drawings for ejection seats, rather like the Haynes manuals of cars. He was doing it for ejection seats. And so all my brothers and myself are fairly artistic. We've got all our artistic skills from him. But I'm the only one out of all the brothers that went on to do it as an adult. And I've been making a fool of myself ever since. So a few weeks ago, back in January, I was with my daughter and she pulled out this old project that I did in the 1970s at school, which I've completely forgotten about. So I decided to photograph it because we was allowed to do story projects at school. So I did King Kong. So I think around that time, 1978 or something, a new King Kong film had come out and everyone was raving about it at school. So I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to do a King Kong story. So that's my King Kong there, bursting out a great big crate on the ship and everyone's running for cover. So, I mean, even back then I was kind of artistic, and I remember my old school teacher, Mr. Brown, saying, oh, take a look at Neil's artwork, he's good at artwork. And I always ended up having to do everybody else's artwork in their projects. I never got my own one done. But as I got a bit older, my interest in space developed, because I used to watch programs like Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Space 1999, anything with science fiction and space in. And this picture I did at school in about 1979, I think. And I was inspired by then the Voyager probes that have gone to Jupiter and Saturn, I think the Voyager 1 and 2. And so it's returning these fantastic pictures of Jupiter with the moons on. So I decided to try and attempt a picture of Jupiter using some of the pictures from magazines. I decided to paint it with a view of Jupiter taken from maybe one of the moons of Jupiter, looking back at it. So that was done in gouache paint, which is like a water-based paint. So I started to get a bit better at sort of painting stuff, science fiction-y. But then my skills expanded into the weird stuff of conceptual art, weird aliens here, and spaceships and fairy and old legends of Orkney and things. More fairy figures here, conceptual artwork here with airbrush. And also done a lot of scratch building models here, which I'll show you a few of those as well. That's some of the artwork I did. That's the sort of scale I work into. That's a number of years ago. That's actually my old next door neighbour's garden, because there wasn't enough room in my garden to put my artwork out on display. So craftily, when she'd gone away on holiday for 2 weeks, I thought, oh, it's lovely weather, I'm going to put all my artwork in her garden and photograph myself sneakily. I think she got her own back though, because when we went away, we found all our homes had been cut down by her, so it's also a karmic thing going on there. So that's the kind of stuff, the pagan visionary artwork, so you've got goddessy, witchy stuff, and green men and that kind of stuff like that. Now, I have obviously moved into the science fiction realm, so you can see the original, this picture over the corner there. This is a flying saucer over a desert, a brilliant original title, as you can tell. Inspired by Roswell and those kind of legends of crashes and things in the New Mexico desert. And I've got this car here, which is actually a classic American car. Now, there's no driver in there, and I always like these ideas of paintings, you can interpret the painting how you want, maybe it tells its own story. Is the driver of the car now in there, or has he run across the desert to escape them, or what has happened to him? You know, you decide, you interpret it how you want to. It took ages to do it though, but I even took a vote on Facebook, you know, what colour should I do the UFO? And I had various mock-ups on Facebook, and people all elected to say they really like the red flying saucer, hence it being red. So most people assumed it'd be a silver one, but this one's red, okay? It kind of shows up a bit there, doesn't it? And as I mentioned, I used to scratch build starships and spaceships. I was actually on that children's show. Does anyone remember Why Don't You from the 1970s? Yeah, some of you do. A bit of a kind of Blue Peter type of show, but it's made by BBC Bristol. I did write to Blue Peter and told that my scratch build models, but the best I could get out there was a Blue Peter badge. But BBC Bristol took an interest in me. And so eventually they came to my house and filmed me with a sort of 5-man crew and filmed the models that I made. And I was getting more ambitious as time went on. So this one, and this is done on an absolute budget, that was just a load of drawn out cardboard. I literally took cardboard from like Tesco's or whatever, cardboard boxes, flattened them out. I'd already done the design of what I wanted to do, drew it all out, cut it out rather like a pattern maker makes a dress, and scored the areas where I was going to fold this thing up and did it up with tape. But coming down the central column here was a long cardboard tube, like a spine, to strengthen it. And that's like a yogurt carton I put over the tube, and then I constructed this bit at the front out of cardboard. I found these cardboard boxes from somewhere, and put 2 garden canes coming through the centre there. And if anyone remembers, I think it's St Ivel's Gold, the margarine tubs. That's those there, kind of separating these giant engines from the main section. And then I did what they call kit bashing, which is where you get bits of old Airfix kits, anything plastic, and you stick it all on and arrange it so it's kind of functional. And then you spray it all up with different car paints and masking and things like that. And then hey presto, you've got your own fantastic spaceship. But the trouble is I was getting too ambitious and then getting so big I was running out of room. But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff I did. I actually still do this kind of stuff when I get time to do it. There's another one there, a slightly smaller one, similar kind of thing. But that was, I had my 5 minutes of fame back in 1978 or 79. Now, there's a familiar face here. If anyone can recognise this gentleman, he's at the back there. That's just been pointed out. There's Marcus Allen there, who's at the back there. He's taken part in a podcast that I do with a friend of mine called Andrew Chaplin called The Paranormal Peep Show. And we discuss all sorts of things, esoteric, paranormal, which can anything be ghosts, hauntings, fairies, UFOs. And we invited Marcus to talk about the Apollo moon landings, fact or fiction. So a lot of you perhaps know him do that kind of stuff. And with Marcus also we do something called the Apollo Detectives, where we go online and talk about were the Apollo missions completely fact, or were they partly faked, or whatever. We don't know the whole truth, but we have a few suspicions that maybe they're not telling us everything. So if you want to check that out, that's on YouTube or on Spreaker, The Paranormal Peep Show. Now, as I mentioned, I do have an interest in the moon, and one of them was sparked by the fact I did get a telescope when I was about 12 for a birthday present, and I love looking at the moon through my telescope. And then one day, when I was at school, and it's one of those days where you see the moon in the daytime sky. But on this occasion, I was actually at school, and I saw this little Well, I thought, what is it? It looked like a tiny little star right near the moon. And it was there the whole time during my dinner break at school. And I kept looking up and I thought, what is it? And I was thinking, the only way I'm going to maybe find out is when I get home from school, about 4:15, is run upstairs, grab my telescope and look out the window. So it was still there by the time I got home at about 4:15. And I looked through my telescope, looked at this small glowing object near the moon, and I couldn't tell anything. It was still just a tiny, tiny white dot, and it still didn't move. So what I've done here, I've recreated what I saw. It wasn't a photograph of the day in question. I recreated what I saw in Photoshop. So that was like the object there, and there was the moon, and it was just there until the moon went down. Now whether it was Venus, I don't think it was Venus, because I have a feeling that Venus was on the other side of the sky, because I always used to see that come up, it was the first star of the evening, as they called it, when it rose as the sun set. And I haven't seen it since. I didn't know what it was. Maybe it's just a conjunction of stars or something like that, but this was midday that this thing was showing up. You don't normally see stars at midday. So I had no idea what it was. No one else seemed to notice either at school. No one pointed out and talked about it. I seemed to be the only person that noticed it. I was really dumbfounded. Still to this day, don't know what it was. Don't know what it was. Now, I will scrap that because for some reason, there should be a book cover there called Who Built the Moon? And it all worked previously. I tested this out today. It showed up fine, I thought, great, I'm happy with that. And then today, bang, it's decided not to be there. The end has obviously got a problem with it. But basically, it's a book about these two guys have gone into the whole thing about the moon and its dimensions and the fact it's got no core inside and it's roughly the same size as the sun when it has an eclipse, etc., etc. Conclusions, it shouldn't really be there. It's like too perfect. And they came to three conclusions. One, it was put there by God. Two, it was put there by aliens. Or three, they said it's put there by our future selves and sent back in time, which is a bit weird. But I read the book with a kind of open mind. I'm still not deciding which one might be true. It makes a case of all three. But it's certainly worth looking into. Now, facts about the moon. The moon revolves exactly 1/100th of the speed that the Earth turns on its axis. The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, and it's precisely 400 times closer to the Earth. They also discovered that the moon possesses little or no heavy metals and has no core. I think it does have a core, actually, but a very, very small one in comparison to other planets and other moons and stuff. Some specialists suspect the moon is actually hollow as well. Now, if our moon did not exist, nor would we. This is what they suggest. Experts now agree that higher life only developed on Earth because the moon is exactly what it is and where it is. Now, where it is interesting because apparently the moon is moving further away every year. So by about an inch a year, it's further away. So if we go back to 1969, when man allegedly landed on the moon, it's actually another 50 inches out from there now, or 52 inches. So it's going to cost another gallon of petrol to get there, I think, which is going to be really expensive. So, you've obviously all looked up at the moon, I presume, and some people just wonder what those little shadowy things are. That's where they call them lava plains. As the moon was forming, different parts called it at different times. So they call them the Mars or Nares. I mean, this area here, this area here was supposedly the Sea of Tranquility where the first moon landing occurred. And the alleged moon landings all happened around these areas here on the moon. None happened on the backside of the moon. But there's supposedly a mission that's going to happen in the next 10 years called Artemis. And I believe they're going to land on the south part of the moon. Is that right, Marcus? South part of the moon? Yeah, south part of the moon. Rather than these areas. The Chinese have put a probe on the backside of the moon, a little rover, which no one thought was possible, but what they've got is a satellite that orbits the moon and sends a signal via the probe back to Earth. That's the only way they can get it back there. Right, moving on. Now this is Evolution of the Moon by NASA. It was believed that their idea of how it happened was that there was a collision with a planet or something, hit the Earth, and it spent a long time orbiting each other until this section broke back out of it. Once it broke back out of it and started to orbit by itself, it was this fiery, kind of glowing hot rocky fillet. And this is going over billions of years, by the way. So I'll just stand out of the way, and we can see it happen. Did anyone see that? So that's it starting to cool down. And of course the moon has no atmosphere, so there's nothing to stop meteorites hitting it, as you can see, all these explosions. That's at the South Pole. And this is what causes a lot of these dark patches you see on the moon today. You'll start to see it as more recognisable as this video goes on. A little bit. There we go. Okay. So we can see these shapes now, which become like the man in the moon face eventually. Okay. And look at that, it says 3 billion years ago or something like that occurred. And then more meteorites hit it, because obviously the moon's covered with craters, basically. So it gets a bombardment, continual bombardment of craters. So here we go with a few more in a second. There we go. Intermediate cratering. Over millions and millions of years. It's a lot clearer now to do. I wouldn't feel safe actually on the moon if all that's going on. I mean, I don't know if anyone's watched a meteorite shower. It's quite safe to do so because the chance of a meteorite hitting is pretty slim. And the fact that when you're on Earth, you've got the atmosphere protecting you as such because they burn up. But here, there's no such atmosphere. So, you know, there's so many of these meteorites here, and they can be small fragments of dust. And if you're on there, that, you know, it could take you out basically, getting at that sort of speed. Now, it starts to look more recognisable as the moon we see it today, you see. So that's done by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which orbits the moon and takes pictures of the moon. I say they've recreated it, but the pictures we see of the moon on computer graphics and things like that have been put together by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Oh, that's it. Who built the moon? That's where that picture was. I thought it was earlier on, but that's the book I was telling you about earlier. Okay. Now, people over the years have started to look at the moon through the telescopes, and it goes right back in time when people first started developing telescopes. They started to look at the moon and study what was on there. And over the years, some people have noticed strange things in craters. And this goes right back to the 1800s and maybe even further back. And they've written down, they had no cameras to record them, but people have taken those descriptions and using Photoshop technology tried to recreate what these descriptions were. And so they describe like lights in craters, weird fogs and things like that. So we're going to take a quick look at the lunar anomalies that people have described. So this one's from the 18th of October, 1824. And there's what they call an appearance of multiple coloured lights or points in the Aristarchus crater. So again, this is not taken at that time. It's the crater and then photoshopped with the dots to give you an idea. But it was observed that these weird lights are in there. Now, what are they? You know, is it some natural phenomenon, or is it something weird and strange? You know, UFOs, maybe aliens. We don't know, but they kept cropping up over a period of years. These things, they weren't just a one-off. Here we go again. 1877. A line of light appears in the, I think it's called the Eudoxus crater during 1 hour. So it's just a long, big strip light. I think this is something like 20 miles across. It could even be bigger. So that kind of gives you an idea of how that big thing is. Now, people describe seeing UFOs as well as flying saucers. There's also these ones that are described as long, tubular or cigar-shaped UFOs. Could that be one of those parked in there, for instance? It's just speculation. But, you know, those sorts of things shouldn't really be there, should they? And here's another one, 1954, the same crater that we saw before. This time it's filled with a gleam of blue-purple kind of glow, or blade is described there. Now, what's causing the glow for starters? Where's that coming from? Is it charged particles or something? Is it some weird kind of landing platform for a UFO? I mean, I'm speculating again. But again, no one's come up with any clear explanation, and it's not reported on mainstream news, and yet they're all recorded in these lunar anomalies catalogues that NASA's got as well. So NASA certainly know about this kind of stuff. There's another one, some time later, about 10 years later. Similar kind of blue glow there with a bit of pink in there. So some of these craters seem to be quite active for these things. And it could be something escaping from the centre of the moon, you know, some sort of discharge or something maybe. But they haven't investigated to find out what it is. It could be evidence of aliens. I mean, this is a weird one. 7 white points of the form of the Greek letter gamma in the Littrow crater. Now, are they natural, or are they UFOs parked there waiting to take off, or landed? But that was being reported as being seen through a telescope. And we don't see these images today, yet they still must be occurring. Why aren't we seeing these images today on the mainstream news? We should be. Now, if anyone's seen 2001 Space Odyssey, I'm sure many of you have, the basic story of that was that it was discovered there was this monolith buried deep beneath a crater that sent out a magnetic kind of signal. It's only when they excavated did they discover this kind of 7-foot-high, large monolith just standing there, which had been placed there by aliens millions of years before. The idea was it was a beacon. When mankind had reached the heights of technology, he would eventually discover it, and that would trigger communication with these aliens when the time was right. Now, in the film, they keep the whole of that story quiet. What they do, they tell everybody there's a plague outbreak on the moon, so the moon is off limits. The moon base in the film is now off limits, and no one wants to go there, because they actually want to keep that thing secret. So, and it's a bit like in Close Encounters, where they're going to find the mothership of Devil's Tower. They clear the whole area by telling everyone there's a plague there, and not to go there. And that clears everyone, because no one goes there and sees what's happening. So it makes you wonder, if you hear of these various plagues, don't go there on Earth or whatever like that, could there be another story behind it? The Brookings Institute advised the United States in 1959 proposed studies on the implications of peaceful space activities for human affairs, because mankind was just venturing into space with the satellites and things like that. And so they just started to think, well, hang on, if we're going to venture out into the solar system, we've got to be prepared with the possibility that there could be things out there. So they were saying, be aware of the social economic chaos resulting from alien artifacts found on the moon or Mars, because they got the experience from the War of the Worlds radio broadcast from 1938 that traumatized America. If anyone knows that story, it's the Orson Welles radio broadcast where they said the Martians are landing. It was done almost like a real story, a real news broadcast at the time. People tuned in halfway through and really thought the Martians were landing and were heading to the hills, basically. So that kind of taught them a lesson. So this is why the Brookings Institute came up with this idea that they've really got to be careful if they're going to announce these things. If people talk about disclosure, are we going to have alien disclosure? I mean, maybe we should have had it years ago, but they're still teaching on the idea of whether there are certain bits of information are released every year, like we had these the Tic Tac UFOs, or we had this report last year that came out, a 7-page report from the Pentagon talking about UAPs, which is the new word for UFOs, UAPs being unidentified aerial phenomena. So that way, if you sign a request saying, can you tell me everything about UFOs, you might get back a blank letter. Oh, we have nothing from UFOs. It's because they've changed the name. So you have to be careful and word it how you want when you want a freedom of information request. What have we got here? Oh yeah, now I know that I think we've seen this picture before in other talks. This is a rock rolling out of a crater. It's not evidence of aliens, but it's just an interesting image here. So you can see this red line. They think the rock was originally there. Now, something brought it up to there. Now, how it rolled up and out of a crater, not quite sure. It might have been some sort of moonquake or something like that. But you can definitely see the marks caused by this rock as it rolled along. I'll just go forward, you can see a closer up of it. There it is there. You can definitely see the track marks there, a bit like a tractor tyre marks. They need a certain kind of tread in the mud, don't they? But it's almost something like that. It's got a certain shape to it that's left that indentation. And it's probably about the size of a bus, I think, that rock is estimated to be. There's definitely some sort of activity on the moon. Now, this is allegedly a UFO tumbling past the moon, question mark. It's got no audio, you probably won't see anything for the first minute or two. This is done through a high-powered telescope, and this guy has a hobby of filming things in front of the moon. Now that's not to say that it's actually around in orbit around the moon, but what I believe is happening, the moon provides a suitable backdrop for this object to show up. So if that was going through the night sky above Earth, you wouldn't see it. It's only when it crosses something that's white and glowing does it show up. So this is actually, the moon's providing a suitable backdrop for it to be seen. Now you'll see something, I know people at the back might have trouble seeing this, we will get close up, I promise. But it's moving down somewhere from up here, a tiny little object coming down here, and then the guy puts like a red circle to help us track it. So this is just the beginning part of it. But it's got extremely high power telescope with recording facility on it, which makes it handy for us. So I can't even see it here, but here we go. Now, he's put like a little grid pattern and he's speeded it up. You can see, maybe somebody can see that red arc. It's actually this little red circle there. You'll see it again in a close-up in a second. Right, he's zoomed in now. Can you see that? There it is. Now that could be a satellite, but he says it's tumbling, so maybe it's a loose piece of space debris. Doesn't mean it says aliens on the moon, okay? But from him, he says there's an unidentified flying object, but it could be anything. But it appears to be tumbling, it could be space junk, something in orbit around the Earth, I suspect. But it's the backdrop of the moon that makes it visible. It's not glowing, doesn't seem to be perhaps operational or something. It's not catching the sunlight in any way that I can see. It could be discarded material from a space station or something, or old discarded rocket stages, that kind of thing. Now, a good way of testing that is if you came back, say, the same time the next night, if it's something going around in orbit around the Earth, you'd expect to come back, because these things generally orbit the Earth every 90 minutes or so. So you could presumably come back like the next night around the same time, and maybe spot it again, if the moon is in the right position again. It'll only happen at certain points, because the moon's obviously moving through the sky as well. And here is it again, you can see it now, it's speeded up. And you can see it moving way across there. A lot of times when you see these things move through the night sky, these satellites and things, they're moving at a hell of a speed, and you can sort of see them whizzing across, you know. And, you know, they can travel around the world in about 90 minutes. So, you know, you've got maybe 10 seconds of seeing something as it crosses the night sky. Right, okay, there's another one here. You get it? This is slightly more interesting. Look at this one. He says. No, try again. Next one. Yeah. Here it is. I hope it's going to play. Here we go, yeah. A craft fire thrusters. This is probably man-made. More self-explanatory. It's kind of interesting. Crow777 on YouTube. He does loads of these videos. He did the previous one as well.
Okay, welcome to the Crow Discovery Project. We had a lot of requests to take a look at the kind of high-altitude thruster craft, and so we're going to do that. By the way, this image, that's supposed to be a moon. Someone made this image for me, and it was originally like a planet thing. I tried to make it look like a moon, but anyhow. It's going to come in at the top here. There it is, passing those big kind of smudgy areas on the moon. And this is the thruster vehicle that was posted, I don't know, probably well over a year ago. This was shot during the daytime. The sky looks black because I'm running city light filters, but it was perfectly blue skies. Sunset was not far off, but the sky was still blue when I shot this. Just happened to be very fortunate. I set up early this night, and the only downside is it's shot with my old equipment, so the resolution isn't what I get now. But anyhow, it's an interesting thing. It changed my point of view on a few things when I saw it, because I had never seen any object where there was a light. By the way, that thing that fell down the left side of the frame is because I'm tracking the center. That's junk on my sensor. It's not an object going by. The only object in this whole entire clip will be the thing that's in the center screen now. Anything else is just junk on my sensor, and it looks to be moving by because of the way I'm manually tracking the object to the center. At the time, so many people went and looked to see if they could correlate this to some kind of a test being done or anything else, and I don't think we ever landed on anything that we could call for sure this vehicle. What we do know is that there's 3 thruster engines, and I think this clip is a good example of what I say about all that I filmed, that these are not alien things. These are terrestrial technology. Everything I have shot. The only thing that really makes you scratch your head is the sheeting orb clip that was shot in chemtrails. That's the only one where you just kind of go, wow, I don't even know what that is. But this is clearly a machine, and it's clearly a machine with 3 thrusters. The interesting thing about this is, as I was re-editing, every time the thrusters come on, as I track the center, the vehicle will have moved less. So each time the thrusters come on, the vehicle is slowing. When the thrusters are off, and I would track the center, I would have to pull the object up to my little mark in the center frame much further. When the thrusters fire, it appears to be slowing this craft down. And it's unfortunate that one of the big drags about this clip was right when I cut the clip thinking I had lost the vehicle, I noticed right at the end there's an engine flare way down in the corner.
Okay, so there he said he believes it's terrestrial technology, and thrusters, rocket motors tend to be terrestrial kind of stuff. But when most satellites are going over, they tend to be, once they're up there, they might have one little rocket motor just to adjust its orbit, or tiny little things. However, it's got 3 main engines to slow it down. So is that something we should be known about, perhaps? Is it something that's hidden technology, maybe? The fact it's right, its thrusters suggests to me that it's trying to slow down, maybe to come back into the Earth's atmosphere as well. It's like braking, if you like. But he's managed to catch it again. It's the backdrop of the moon that's allowing him to capture that. Otherwise, he may not have spotted it. Aliens on the moon. This is from a mainstream broadcast. Now, the mainstream are looking at this kind of stuff as well.
I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically, it becomes an unidentified black object.
On Neil and Buzz were over the surface, Neil switched to the Momentum channel and spoke directly with the Chief Medical Officer, saying, they're here, they're parked inside the crater, they're watching us.
I spotted a lot of stuff and seemed to not belong on the moon.
And it has very distinct features of satellite dishes. The dish itself, the crater shape, it's got a long spike that appears to come out in the middle. All sorts of stuff that looks exactly like a satellite dish on Earth.
Tonight, we'll examine all the evidence. We'll attempt to determine if such an alien menace exists. And we'll investigate the baffling case of Apollo 12.
This is the video, so I'll stay quiet.
An alien that recovered from the Apollo mission, and this lady is corpse now, and an alien. I wouldn't trust that myself. It could be other footage that's being incorporated into this video. But you can see that these are various photos that they've got at NASA, supposedly, possible bases on the moon. See, there is there. What is that? A radar dish? There's a tumbling rock we saw earlier on. And these are other lunar photographs of various things. And you go right in, and there's what on earth are they, for instance. So, yeah, normally you get the sound of this, and they talk you through it. And again, these are the lights I spoke about earlier. Now, that's something you can find out on YouTube. It's called Aliens on the Moon. It's worth a watch.
I think it's on Netflix or something like that. That's it. Alright, okay, that's that one done. So yeah, that's from Aliens on the Moon. I think it's on Netflix, possibly on YouTube if you want to try and track that down. It's interesting that mainstream have made programs about this, and they're kind of willing to kind of delve there. And they're taking all these pictures and examining them and enhancing them and things. And they're making their own conclusions. So maybe we are being kind of drip-fed disclosure information slowly, and these little things that creep through like aliens on the moon is one way of going there. Right, an alien base on the moon. This is not from Space 1999, although you might see something. If anyone remembers Space 1999, the Moon Base Alpha, that's that there. But it's not that at all. That's just the introduction to it on this video. This is a guy that's got a very high-powered telescope. His name will come up in a minute. Here we go. John Leonard Olson. He captured the following footage of the moon with an 8-inch telescope, and what he captured on the film is pretty mind-blowing. So you may not see all of it, but I'll try and point some things out as they come up. And some of it actually was a bit similar to some of the stuff we just saw in the video there. Okay, so it's a shimmering effect because that's the atmosphere of the Earth causing that disturbance. You can see these structures here. Oh, there we go. Weird structures, square things. Looks like almost like walls, maybe. Structures over there. Very blurry. Some square sort of stuff up there. And it gets slightly distorted through the lens a little bit. There's definitely sort of square things up here, and that looks like a wall. And some weird, I mean, they could be the way of the craters are. But look, more square things up here. Very, very brief, unfortunately. But is that an indication of something long and lost and forgotten about? Okay, now, those structures could be something to do with this man, possibly. This man is Ingo Swann. He's a remote viewer. Anyone heard of him? No? Okay. One person, Marcus? Another person back there? Okay. So basically, he was an American gentleman back from the 1970s, and he had an uncanny ability. He could, I mean, some people might say he went out of his body, perhaps, I don't know, but somehow he could send his mind to locations, and the Russians are apparently doing something like this as well. They're using psychics, mediums, and things like that to try and look at each other's technology secretly. And so this Ingo Swann chap was employed by the government to focus his mind on certain coordinates in Russia, looking at tanks or nuclear bases or missiles, anything like that, and he'd have to report back on what he was seeing. But he actually got a little bit bored one day after spending ages looking at this kind of stuff. And he said to his boss, "Can I try something different?" So he recorded everything he did in this book called Penetration, and it's got the picture of the moon there, and that's the clue about what this book is about. So basically, what he did, first of all, he said, "I want to try something different. I want to try and remote view Jupiter." So his boss said, "Yeah, give it a go. Give it a go." So he tried to send his mind there, and this is before the Voyager probes went to Jupiter in about 1979. This was about 18 months prior. So he sent his mind, or remote view Jupiter, and he came up with an interesting report of what he discovered there. According to Swann, his ability to see Jupiter took about 3.5 minutes. In the session, he made several reports on the physical features of Jupiter, such as its surface, atmosphere, and weather. Swann's statement that Jupiter had planetary-like rings like Saturn was controversial at the time. Now, going back to about 1978, no one knew that Jupiter had planetary rings, and it's only when they sent the Voyager probes there about 1979, 18 months later, that they was able to have a really, really close look at Jupiter and the moons of Jupiter, and they discovered there was a planetary ring of Jupiter. Now, it's not seen by Earth because it's so tiny. So it surprised scientists when this was picked up, and yet the Voyager probes picked it up later on, and Swann was claiming that he saw them 18 months beforehand. So he gives a description. They're very high in the atmosphere, and they're crystals, and they glitter. Made stripes like Anza crystals, made like the rings of Saturn, though not that far out like Saturn is. Very close within the atmosphere. He says, "I bet you they reflect radio probes. And it's possible that if you had a cloud of crystals that are sorted by different radio waves." I'm not quite sure what he means by that. That's what he said. So there's Voyager 2, and there's Voyager 1. They were sent out about 4 months apart. They both reached the Jovian system, which is where Saturn and Jupiter are. They're now on the outer edges of the solar system, and they've left what we would term our territory, if you like. And I think they're still sending signals back, but they're in kind of dark space where they're not actually seeing much at all. And eventually they'll run out of power, I suppose, and they'll all go totally quiet. But this is the things that confirm what Swann was seeing 18 months before. Now, this is where it gets very interesting, because of that ability, he could tell what was happening on Jupiter 18 months before the probes got there. People started to take notice of it. One was a chap called Mr. Axelrod, who wasn't employed by the American government. He was just an extremely well-off man who offered Swann a load of money, basically, tax-free, to come and do some remote viewing for him. So he said he was working for the US government, but Swann actually thought he wasn't later on. Axelrod tasked Ingo with a series of moon coordinates. And unknown to Swann, the target moon coordinates, about 10 different locations around the moon, were bringing to mind what he soon realised was an unearthly extraterrestrial presence. So basically, Swann would lay on the couch, he would tune in, and Axelrod would say to him, "Right, here's the coordinates, 22, 23, blah, blah, blah." It's a bit like the National Lottery, isn't it? And he would sort of go to that coordinate, and he wasn't even told it was the moon. And he'd suddenly say, "Oh, I think I'm on the moon." And he said, "What do you see there?" And he said, "Well, I can see some machinery," saying, "and then I can see humanoids." But he described the weird thing, he described these humanoids as naked. Weird, isn't it? No spacesuits or anything. They were just naked humanoids He said they appear to be mining the moon. You know, taking the regolith from the lunar soil up and doing something with it, harvesting it in some way. And then he said, they're aware of me, they can see me. So maybe he was out of his body, but these people had some sort of psychic ability to see him. And as soon as he said that they can see me, Axelrod said, get out of there now, get out there, come straight back. So he did come straight back. Now, what was postulated, he was told not to tell anyone about these experiences, but he decided to write it maybe 10, 15 years later when everything had died down, hence the book Penetration. And he postulated that Mr. Axelrod didn't work for the US government. He actually wondered if he was some sort of extraterrestrial himself. And he likened it to the idea of, say, a company that's a high-tech computer company wants to test its defense systems out against hackers and things like that. So what they might do is employ a hacker to go into their computer systems, so try and break into our computer defences. When a hacker does so, then they know where they've got a weak area. And he postulated that it was something like that, that Ingo Swann was like the equivalent of a hacker, and Axelrod probably knew who these beings were on the moon, and they wanted to test out whether mankind could penetrate their own defences on the moon, because they were discovering that certain people, like Axelrod, were getting highly psychic, and they knew that possibly could be a threat to their operations. And so therefore, they wanted to see if Axelrod could actually go to the moon, you see. That was what he considered was the situation. So, you know, is that real or is it made up? I don't know. It's a very, very interesting story. Now, somebody else talks about mining on the moon. This was a guy called George Leonard in 1977. He wrote a book called Somebody Else is on the Moon. And he went around with another chap and tracked down all these old photographs from lunar probes and things. And unfortunately, the book it is available on the internet as a free PDF, but the photographs are so poor resolution, they've had to draw pictures to replace the pictures. And so you could say, well, it just made everything up, you know, there's nothing really there to see. But anyway, the book is interesting to read. What they claim is that they were allowed access to some of these NASA photographs, of lunar photographs taken from orbit or something, and they described weird pipes coming out of craters, strange machinery on some photographs, some sort of activity of excavation, they believe. So they believe that someone was there, but they weren't, you know, going to tell everyone about it. So maybe that confirms what the previous book, Penetration, was talking about. So maybe there's definitely something going on up there, because two people reported it independently. Now, is this a possible alien base, allegedly taken by Apollo 11 in 1969, or is it just a smudge on the camera? We don't know, but there's something there to have a look at. And we saw this on the Aliens on the Moon video. This is a close-up of allegedly a dish. It could be a cup of tea in a saucer, I don't know. I mean, do aliens have dishes as well? I mean, if they are, you know, they've got Sky TV or something. But this one here, or is it just a cradle with a funny mark? You make your mind up, but people speculate, is it really there or not? I mean, it could be Photoshop as well. Now, this is an interesting guy. This is Paul Davies, a scientist. He appears on Radio 4 mainstream TV. And he actually says to search for signs of extraterrestrial life on the moon. Scientist Paul Davies suggests focusing attention on images captured by NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. According to the Guardian newspaper, NASA has made more than 340,000 LRO, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, images public, but that figure is expected to reach 1 million by the time the orbiting probes mapped out the whole lunar surface. So the ASU scientists explain, from these numbers, it's obvious that a manual search by a small team is hopeless, which is why they suggest calling on amateur enthusiasts, i.e. public, over the internet, to assist with the process of scanning the LRO images for potential alien artifacts. So this guy, mainstream scientist, is suggesting that the public, those who want to go, could look at all these images for possible alien artifacts. He's suggesting himself there's possible alien artifacts on the moon. So they want your assistance with it. So get clicking. So here's such an image maybe that might be something. But interestingly, someone's gone and blurred it out. So someone suggests here, there's a, I didn't write this, let's put that there, a huge pipe exiting and going around this object, but mysteriously this section here has been smudged out, but all the rest is pretty much in focus. So are they trying to hide something? I mean, why publish the picture anyway if you deliberately blur it out? But it's tantalising, you left a bit of an object there. This one's interesting. This is the 1960s lunar orbiter mosaic. This looks like one of those old digital watches from the 70s, with that kind of face you used to get, you know, you sort of press the button and it used to glow. But it's a weird one, isn't it? This is kind of the lunar surface with rocks and things, and then you've got this weird shape here, which is like bands or something. You know, what on earth is it? There's a little cross there. I don't know if that's something to do with the registration marks of the camera or something. There's some marks up here, maybe that's a scratch negative, perhaps, I don't know. But that's the central information there. But I've never seen anything like that on the moon. That doesn't look natural to me. I mean, someone could have photoshopped it, messed about this to fool us, perhaps. Now, we talked about excavations on the moon earlier. This is possible evidence of that, maybe. So, excavated crater in the larger crater of Flamsteed P. Now, up here, you've got these different layers coming here. And if anyone's been to a quarry, they know that they're excavating layers as they dig down into it. Could that be evidence of something like that? Now, you've got a line coming across here, and just about this point, there's a line coming across there, but then the line continues just beyond that point. So in other words, it looks like they dug that part out, and then dug that part out, but piled that bit over that bit. So it suggests that it's not a natural formation. It looks like someone's been deliberately digging there, okay? And that could be similar kind of stuff here, but that one's certainly stronger. There's a diagram I'll show you that explains it in a bit more detail. Okay, so that crater we saw. So what it is, the first line of soil came across like that, and it had a point sticking out, which shows it must have been the original part of the excavation. And then someone else comes along and digs another part, piles it over there perhaps, or lays it or something, but it doesn't look natural. You'd expect a crater edge to be more circular around, but this is like two lines intersecting. Signs of aliens, maybe? Okay, and there's a sphere in this one, that's right. Small, tiny sphere, which is there. Now, could that be some 2001-ish? If they excavated some sort of monolith, maybe? But there's more signs of maybe soil and the different layers here to this thing going deeper and deeper down. So it's almost as if they dug in and then piled a load of stuff there to get to that, perhaps. Okay? Now, this is a bit of a weird one. This is from our friend Chrome777. With his camera, he's been filming these things he called lunar waves, which are like a shimmering wave of energy, if you like, that goes over the moon's surface. And since he put his versions out, other people around the world have done their own versions of the lunar wave. Now, it might be a real phenomenon, but he's attests that it is. I'll let you watch it.
Which is a YouTube channel. You can go look them up. The original footage is posted there. It's an interesting wave capture, and made even more interesting because of the movement of the camera, which again proves things about the wave, of course. But another interesting thing is this may be the only wave capture in the dead of winter. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that might be correct. Anyhow, there's no audio. I've lifted the audio track, which was music from the original clip. I'll run it here. And again, if you go to Rethinking It All on YouTube, you can see the original footage. There it is, man. Cheers.
Now, look around the edge for shimmering things circled here. We'll see some close-ups of it in a second. Can't see it up there. There's something up there. Right up there. It's right up there. You'll see some close-ups come around this edge in a second. That's the camera shaking on the tripod, I think, as he adjusts to get the top half of the moon. He's got to refocus his camera a bit. There it is, more in focus now. We'll get some close-ups in a second. Yeah, you can see some come down the right hand side. That's not from, here we go. Here we go, that line down there, see? There it goes, right at the top. You can see it shimmering as it crosses the whole of the moon. There goes another one. Moon up there. And this is where you see it quite clearly once he focuses his camera. There it comes down the right hand side. Sort of like shimmer away. This distortion come across there, like a shockwave going around the moon. And there it comes down there as well. You see another one? There it goes up there. It goes across the moon. There goes another one. Now this is filmed by someone else, not the channel owner, and these are various people that said, yeah, we've seen it too, we caught it on our cameras, and they sent it to him to have a look at. There it goes, quite clearly, you can see that one go around there now. There, boom, around the corner, and then they slow this one down, as you can see it there, it's a distortion. Now, they claim that that is, you know, a natural thing, but I have also seen counterclaims that you can do this in an editing program. I actually tried it myself in a program called Adobe Premiere, and I could simulate it, but I couldn't get it exactly the same. But maybe they're just much more adept at it, you know. It could be a fake, I'm not saying it's definitely aliens on the moon or anything like that. It could be just something, it could be a natural phenomenon we've just not discovered. But I thought it could be also an indication of something else. Now, allegedly this is taken by Apollo 16, and it's a jet out of the King's crater. So it's a crater that seems to be billowing some sort of dust or something. So there's something there chucking it out. Could that be some excavations going on there? You know, if they're doing things and clearing these things, maybe they're not using diggers like we would, maybe they're just blowing stuff out, you know, using high pressure pipes or something, you know. I mean, in that book earlier, Lands of Air Peace-like pipes on there, maybe they're using pipes that excavate craters. Now, I know that that's a big giant on the moon, no one's actually seen it, but this guy is from 1939, and they did an exhibition, I think in New York, about the moon and space and things like that, and he's actually building a big model moon. You can actually see the seams of it, the panels. But you can see that he's doing a fairly realistic job of it, and he's obviously taking his time. So presumably he hasn't finished it, and I presume that that will be where he seals it all up, so you won't see those lines. But it just goes to show that with a bit of practice and things, you can make large, convincing models of the moon. And here's another one here, maybe a bit later on. You only need half of it. Was this for a film maybe, 2001 perhaps, I don't know. But there's an artist there working and sculpting parts of the moon. Now if you took all those camera things away and you move that moon to the right, put a few stars in there, you can perhaps think, oh yeah, it's definitely the moon. It's actually a model. So it shows how it can be fooled by these things. So this is getting me onto the Apollo subject I mentioned earlier on. You know, who believes we went to the moon as astronauts and things? Is everyone? People convinced by that or not? Ooh. One person, out you go. Okay, so this is a famous photograph from 1972 featuring the geologist, a scientist that went to the moon, and he was Harrison Smith. He later became a senator, Senator Smith, after retirement from the Apollo missions. And this is him, the photograph taken by Gene Cernan, who was the other astronaut on the last alleged moon mission, Apollo 17. And there's the American flag there. And it's a nicely composed shot with the Earth up there. But is it really real? Is it actually on the moon or not? Well, I mentioned I do the Apollo Detectives with Marcus and a few other people online. And one of our researchers, a guy called Scott Henderson from Canada, that spotted this. He spent about 10,000 hours going through these lunar photographs, examining it, because he believed me. He said, well, what's all this stuff about the fake Apollo stuff? Yeah, plenty of time was had because he was spending time at the hospital with his parents that were ill at the time, so he had a lot of time to kill whilst he was there. So he went online and spent a lot of time going through these photographs, examining close up. And he believes that he discovered some problems with that photograph. Now, there's a close up of the flag there, and there it is even closer. And he's discovered there's the arrows indicating what looks like wetness in the flag, damp water in that Apollo flag. I'll get another closer up image. There we go. Now, anyone who puts t-shirts and things out on the line to dry, you're perhaps familiar with the way things dry out in the sun. Some parts are dry and some parts are still damp as it dries out. Well, here we go. There is these dark shadows here. Now, this is a shadow caused by the crease in the flag. Just like that's a dark shadow. But here, you've got these bright hot spots of light where the sunlight is hitting the stars. So therefore, that lightness should be light to there as well, but in fact it's dark. because you've got this what appears to be dampness, and it's drying back as it shrinks out and evaporates. Now, should that be really happening on the moon? And why is it wet? It doesn't rain on the moon, does it? So where could it be? It's been suggested that the Apollo missions might have been faked in a place called Flagstaff in Arizona. And they had maybe a big moon set there, but it's also possibly a place where there's a landfill and there's junk, and they just covered it all over with lunar regoliths simulating lunar dust. Because he thinks he's found old cars and bits of machinery on the moon. So that inspired me to take a closer look, and last year I spent all night up going through all these pictures, saying, oh my god, look at this, I'll show you some of the stuff that I found. So there we go, look, that's an I found on the Apollo 17 picture frame. It almost looks like one of these iPad covers or something. But that's from, you see some the rocks there, but this is clearly something that is a square dropped object. You could have said it'd been dropped by the astronaut, I'm prepared to accept that, but then I found other weird stuff that couldn't have been dropped by the astronauts. I mean, look at this. I call this Apollo 17 pigs in space. Look at that. There's one bit loinky, and there's another bit loinky. But they're both the same. So, okay, you can say, well, they're Photoshop, but why Photoshop these Apollo pictures? Why duplicate those images? And you can clearly see that there's a rock there, there's a little rock there in the shadow. Now, there's a bit of darkness here, but there isn't one there. So, could it be a mistake, or have they intentionally put whistleblower clues in these photographs? It's a very strange thing. I mean, is that the shape of the rock like a pig, or is that something in front of it? I don't know, but anyway, I call them pigs in space because that's the way I laid them up on my thing. But that's from an Apollo photograph. So, you know, that's when you start having some serious doubts about the whole thing. You know, anyone to iron a spacesuit? Well, then don't worry about taking an iron because there's one on the moon. There we go, look. It even comes with its own handle. As long as you've got a suitable place to plug it in, away you go. You know, just charge it up on the lunar module, you can iron out those greasy. So this, I mean, you know, you could say, oh, there's just a rock behind a rock. Maybe that's the case. But from a distance, it looks very odd. And you think, well, hang on, if I was an Apollo astronaut and I saw something like that on the moon, I would go over and take a look at it. But obviously they were told to take rocks back with them. This one comes with its own handle to lift back into the lunar module. It's a bit of a weird one. But that's not the only one I've seen. There's another one with a handle. This looks like one of those things when you do, you know, there's punting things on the ice and curling or whatever that is on the ice, but that's got a little kind of handle with a kind of thing. Maybe it's a different type of iron. Scott Henderson believes that it's an old landfill site with all sorts of junk in there. They just covered the whole thing over. So maybe these are things that didn't quite get covered over in the landfill. Now, again, is this aliens? Maybe not. But look at this. There's a circular thing there that goes back. So that's like, I mean, I call it an oil drum, but it may not actually be an oil drum. But again, I have to give it some sort of name as a kind of description to people. But it's got a very circular flat top with a kind of, you know, it's got a bit of dent in it or something, but then it goes back down. And then this rock here, it's very square, oblong. It's situated against another rock there. Some of these rocks look suspiciously chiseled or cut or something, you know, like as if from old, you know when you see the old ruins of Egypt and you see all these bits of broken temples and things like that? That's what it kind of reminds me of, but this one's intriguing. It looks like a big oil drum or something, you know. And this was from the Apollo 17 mission. Now, I don't think you see that clearly, but that's so far away in the distance. And this is why most people miss these things. Whereas I've gone in and looked right at things in the far distance. I'll show you the picture I got it from in a second. But I call it the door, because it looks like a door of a train or something. That's be where it's clear. You can actually put this, you know, you can touch the rock behind it. There's a sort of shape there. It looks like, in the photograph, it looks like it's laying against rocks and it's just been dumped there. But it doesn't look natural. It doesn't look like part of the rock structure. I mean, when you squint, you can see it a bit better maybe, you know. This is a good one. Look at those. A couple of cookies there if you're hungry. Faces, duplicates in that rock stack. Here it's not there, but clearly that rock stack is the same as that one. So again, if they're actually on the moon and you're getting duplicate different rock stacks, look exactly like the next rock stack next to it. As an astronaut, and you're a geologist, and it's Apollo 17, it's your job to go and find these things, but they conveniently missed them. They're too busy with their Genesis rock. That's the kind of pictures that I was looking at. So this is a mosaic from Apollo 17. Station 7 they called it. It's where the astronaut goes click, 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 and they patch it all together. So you could say, oh, it's where they patched it together, they've duplicated things. But a lot of these objects I found are not sort of like between one picture and another. They definitely appear as just one single picture. But you can download these from various sites like NASA and what's the other website, Marcus, you can get them from?
Lunar Planetary Institute.
And there's another one, Flickr as well, isn't it? Flickr. So I think I got this one from Flickr, and you can download various resolutions, and you can literally zoom right in and just have a look. I mean, I found all sorts of weird stuff. I even found around this area, that's roughly where I found that object that was like an iPad type of thing over here somewhere. But I found various things around here, the little pigs on the moon are over here. But you tend to find them in shots where there's like, as if they're near a crater, there's loads of rocks around there. And that's where you sort of start to find weird things that shouldn't be there, which, you can't explain. The weird door thing that I just showed you earlier, if you had find this photo, it was right out over here. So I don't just around, I literally started when I went into the picture and scanned all the way through. And I might do it over a couple of nights, but I've done it to so many different pictures, not just the Apollo 17 ones, Apollo 15 and things like that. Now, getting back to the aliens thing, this is a guy called Carl Wolf, who was in the US Air Force in the 1960s. Has anyone heard of Stephen Greer? Many people? Yeah, okay. So you might know that he did back in 2001 the Disclosure Project, where he took about 20 witnesses from the military, Air Force, scientists and people like that, got them all together at the press club in New York and basically gave a press conference to whoever wanted to come and look at it, and they would be telling you everything they knew about UFOs and what was being hidden from the public, and they were citing various evidences. And this guy, Carl Wolf, came on and talked about what he saw. So I'll just get to the next image. I can get there. Here we go. That should play. Here we go. It's slightly reversed, but this isn't the press club. Just listen to what it says.
1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. Dr. Colley was in charge of that project. They had problems with a piece of electronic equipment that was bottlenecking their production of photographs. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. I was stunned actually to see people at a NASA project from all over the world. It didn't make any sense to me initially. I was taken into the laboratory where the equipment was malfunctioning. I couldn't repair it in the dark. I asked to have it removed. Airman second class was in the dark room at that time. I was also in Airman second class. I was interested in how the whole process functioned, how the data got from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory. I asked the young man if he described the process to me. He did. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment. And I did not question him any further. And a few moments later, someone did come into the room. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress that what I'm saying is the truth.
Okay, very interesting stuff. So that's a photographic technician who works on the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter pictures that we've seen earlier. And he met a guy that said that they found a base on the moon. And he described various mushroom-shaped objects and spheres and towers. And I've got some images later on that possibly might be some of those towers. Now, interestingly, sometime later, this is perhaps in the last 15 years, once this had come to light, this is a funny thing. This is an article written by a journalist in America, and she says, significantly, whistleblowers have come forward to claim that NASA and affiliated government agencies have a policy of destroying or altering photos that reveal artificial structures on the moon or in space. Carl Wolf, who we've seen, for example, claimed that he witnessed NASA, the NSA, that's the National Security Agency, and the US Air Force cooperating to remove such structures from Apollo and satellite imagery when detected. The Washington Times had this to say on Wolf's whistleblower testimony, which I think is a very dumb statement. She goes, likewise, Carl Wolf's claim it was actually told about a base on the dark side of the moon by a NASA official was never proved. It's only hearsay. Surely, if someone at NASA has seriously breached national security by making such a claim, they would be prosecuted. Now, the thing is, NASA is not going to prosecute someone, I would think, if they start talking that they've seen photographs of bases on the moon, because that means they have to go to court and give their side of the story. And they have to start maybe disclosing things or open up vaults and files that they don't want to talk about. I think they just rather the whole problem goes away. So this is why I think these people aren't prosecuted, because if you start prosecuting, then people can start saying, hang on, you definitely got something to hide, you're trying to cover that guy out, you're trying to silence it. So by ignoring it, they're hoping the problem will go away. So I thought it was a very dumb statement. Now, Dr. Ken Johnson, he was the guy that worked on the Apollo missions. He's another apparent whistleblower, and he was a manager, sorry, out of the way. He was a manager of the NASA's Data and Photo Control Department, and Johnson claims he also witnessed moon photos showing artificial structures and was asked to destroy the photos. He refused and was fired by NASA. So, you know, that's another guy that says he's seen these things. Now, this is possibly, although I don't believe it's real because I think the moon landings were possibly fake, people speculated that this is a UFO hiding behind a hill on the moon. It certainly looks like a saucer shape, but here you've got this little black line. Now, because I've worked in broadcast TV, one of the jobs I did was actually look at technical faults in television, and one of them that we had to watch out for was a thing called edging. And that's typically where you get a white object in the picture, and because it's too much for the cameras to cope with, it would kind of try and bring the level down and contrast it and artificially create this black line in the image. It's more on analog TV than digital. And I think that's what we're seeing here. So this is one hill here, and you've got another hill over there, but because it's so bright, it gets weird edging. But people who tell me that's a flying saucer with a shadow behind it, I don't actually believe it's a flying saucer at all. But you might sort of see stuff like that on the internet. There's another example, which is this one here. Again, you notice that these flying saucers just happen to be on the very edge of the horizon. And I think this is the case of edging here, which is artifacts in the video or something. And people have said to me, hang on, I've heard Neil Armstrong talking about aliens on the moon, and apparently, you know, he said there's all these saucers on the edge, and he reported it back to NASA. Well, you know, that proves the moon landings happened because Neil Armstrong saw aliens on the moon. Well, the statement I heard about this is that supposedly Armstrong said the words, yes, sir, they're here on the edge of the crater. What was the word? Yeah, he used sir, but I can't remember what it was. But he said, yes, sir. You used the word sir. And I said to whoever told me, I said, but hang on a minute, listen back to all these Apollo recordings. Have you ever heard of Armstrong talking on the radio back to NASA and calling anyone sir? He never called anyone sir. He'd go Houston or NASA or whatever, blah, blah, blah. He never called anyone sir. So I don't think that's a true statement. But I wonder if these stories are put out as counter-intelligence to help us think that the moon landings happened. So they put all these little stories that circulate with it that they pretend is hush-hush. So therefore, or don't tell anyone, but they actually saw aliens on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, but they were told to keep quiet. Therefore, you psychologically believe the moon landings happened, you see. It's more like a counter kind of psyop thing. They did this in wartime as well. So anyway, the research continued, and I found some very interesting images on this website. And I thought, oh, that looks good. That's definitely a moon base. Look at that there. Look, wow, oh gosh, that's definitely a moon base. But is it? Actually, is it? A few years later, I found this very interesting picture, zoomed in on it, I thought that's the same moon base. Wow, or is it ruins? It could be ruins, but definitely a moon base of some sort. But then I found this film, made in 1955, Vernon von
The
Braun.
voyage around the moon was to be made in 2 phases.
It's talking about the proposed moon missions in 1955.
Use almost all the fuel it can carry just to attain a speed great enough to balance the pull of gravity. Unpowered, it will then keep circling the Earth in an orbit outside of the atmosphere. This is the first phase. However, if we can refuel the ship in this orbit with fuel brought up by cargo rocket ships, it can set out on the second phase, the trip around the moon and back. To facilitate this refueling operation, we will establish an advanced base in the orbit, 1,000 miles above the Earth. This advanced base, or space station, will be headquarters for the final ascent to the moon. Our space satellite will have the shape of a wheel, measuring 200 feet across. This outside rim will contain living.
Okay, it goes on. Of course, that never happened, did it?
This model will show you
Look at that red thing all across this rocket. It's quite laughable, this.
It will be 53 feet in length, has no wings or tail surfaces, because it will be assembled and operated only in the vacuum of space. For the hull of the ship, we are adapting the cabin section of one of the Earth's space station passenger rockets. To the nose, we have added a small atomic reactor, which will drive a steam turbine and furnish electricity for the ship's instruments. This shield will protect the crew members from dangerous radiation. The ship's crew of 4 men will be placed 2 in the front and 2 back here. This is a directional radio radar antenna. Located underneath is the airlock for a spacesuit. The suit can be entered from inside the ship. Clustered around the rear of the ship are the 7 extra fuel tanks filled with hydrogen and nitric acid. All but the centrally located tank will be released when emptying at the end of the return trip to cut down on dead weight. Even though we now have the theoretical knowledge to make a trip to the moon, it will be many years yet.
So that's how he describes a spaceship. And he describes the thing at the front, the red code, as their radiation protector, which I thought was laughable. That's the equivalent of taking an umbrella and it's Chernobyl to protect you against the radiation. It's quite good special effects in 1955. Here we go, they reach all the way around the moon. It's very tense.
I see what looks like a tremendous crater ahead. Bill, what does the contour vibrate again?
No one thought about those little radio snooker cats with mics that they could talk to. They can look back and shout at each other. That's quite a good moon set, isn't it? Not bad.
We'll reach the day-night terminator in 5 minutes. Frank, on your clears to stand by the fire when I get the signal.
So they're going to go to the right side of the moon, far east where, so we can get good look. Here they come.
Okay, Frank, fire your flares at 3-minute intervals. Captain, I'm getting a high factor of 33 degrees. My simulation counter indicates a high degree of radioactivity on the same bearing.
Contour map shows a very unusual formation of about 15 degrees southern latitude and
Spotted
radiation.
something.
It's a flare in that area quick.
There it is. There's that mysterious moon base. These guys just look at each other. They don't say anything. They report it. Oh, okay. So it's interesting that this is a NASA film Media Corporation Disney, and they're suggesting in this official NASA film about aliens on the moon. I think that's quite remarkable. Why would they suggest that? But anyway, so that picture's definitely fake, but it's obviously some serious kind of suggestions in there. They're expecting to find things there, and that's NASA. Okay, now, this is supposedly taken by the Chinese orbiter, Chang'e 2, but I think I've done some further research into this, and someone said it's like a temple in Tibet, and it's been photoshopped on there. So again, you've got to be careful what kind of stuff you find on the internet. It may not all be as it seems. Don't believe everything you see. We've heard show you can do an amazing amount of things. Now, we spoke about the guy that was talking about he'd seen the photographs of the lunar orbiter. He talked about a tower on the moon. This is it's a slightly overexposed image. It's 44 times enlargement of a lunar orbiter. And it's taken with a medium resolution camera at a distance of at least 250 miles, and it shows an object dubbed by Hoagland, we'll talk about him in a second, the shard. The star-like object above the shard is a camera registration mark. So you can see something sticking out the lunar surface, a huge kind of tower of sorts. And we can get another picture of it. There, it says, this is the tower close up, and he says it reveals a cellular-like internal structure. Is it alien? I don't know. Above and behind the shard is the tower, a massive 7-mile high structure with central tube suspended by a tripod-like base. Enhancements of the tower show a similar cellular construction to the shard, but with a distinctly hexagonal pattern. So there's a couple of these things on the moon that they stretch up. I mean, I kind of think of things around the English coastline that have been eroded by the sea. You get these things like in Orkney, these towers and things like that. But also there's no kind of sea on the moon to erode these things. So how do these things become like that? Could it be lumps, strewn up from millions of years ago? Is it made by aliens, or is it some sort of natural thing? Again, we're not seeing close-ups of these pictures generally. Now, Richard Hoagland thought that he had discovered some sort of castle in the sky in this one. He's the guy that looks into the face on Mars, by the way, Richard Hoagland. He thinks makes it nearly impossible for the astronaut taking a picture to have missed it. I mean, it could be an artifact on the camera, it could be a scratch on the lens, I don't know, but it doesn't, what could it be? So, alien bases, is there an alien base on the moon? More people are coming forward with stories that might prove this to be true. Rumors say that there is an alien base on the moon on the far side, but are we really going back to the moon? I'm going to skip past that bit. Now, even Google have gotten in the action. If anyone's used Google Moon, you might have found this one. This is a crater, but there distinctly seems to be a series of dots there. Is that something that Google have put in there? Or is it something that they've accidentally caught from the lunar orbiter photographs? Sometimes they put these things as a bit of a joke. Here's another interesting thing. I'm not sure if this is from a lunar orbiter, but you can see here that like distinct wheel things. I think this is on the Aliens and the Moon documentary you can find on YouTube. Someone's got them highlighted in there. And if anyone's seen The Empire Strikes Back, the rebel base on the planet, ice planet Hoth, they're these kind of disc-like structures as part of their rebel base. Someone has likened these to that kind of thing there, but should they be there on the moon? I mean, is it really there? It's a weird thing. Definitely some sort of strange structures there. And there's that dish on the moon we saw earlier. Now this is Richard Hoagland, who has looked at lots of lunar photographs and lots of Mars photographs. He took the idea of taking these images and scanning them on a scanner. But when he started doing it, the scanners back then weren't very good, and they used to have these weird contrast issues. And so some people suggested it's just an issue. I mean, this is where he believes that he calls them glass-like structures on the moon. I don't think there are these glass-like structures on the moon. I mean, it's embarrassing to the aliens when they're trying to get changed to go to bed, and they're in their glass towers, and you can see all their bits, if they've got them, of course. So here we are, the moon structure, you've got this, what he claims is a weird glass-like structure on the moon. I think that is more of an artifact of the early scanners that they used to have. That's a close-up of it there. Now this is, someone's put here, and it's a skeptic that it's come from, because these are the hairs that appear on the scan. Because Richard Hoagland had a big bushy beard like Father Christmas, he's got Hoagland's beard hair, he's put in very sarcastic tones. So he's obviously very sceptical of this, and this is what he suggests was a problem with the scanner. Now getting back to this tower, this was taken by a Soviet moon probe. It is again a genuine picture. Here we have something like the moon. It's not a clear resolution image of the moon, but this is early 1965 before they had really good cameras. You've got something up there, look, sitting up there. We haven't seen that in later pictures. That seems to have been hidden. We're not to know about that, are we? There's a close-up of it. By the way, the moon is roughly the size of Australia. If you took it out and scanned it on Australia, roughly cover that size. That tower's got to be pretty big. This is something that came to light recently through the research of Amanda Siracina, who is part of the Aetherius Society. He's also interested in structures on the moon and Mars. And he said in these images, which I'll try and show you, this is on the very sort of south side of the moon. This is obviously taken from the lunar orbiter, so you can directly down on it from above. But there's this object here that you can see the shadow it casts. It's almost like a great big wall. Here's the lunar soil covering it up, but there seems to be parts that go into the soil. It is to sort of like an L shape, I suspect, that kind of helps it stand up. Now, is that part of that? Is that falling off of that? Because that definitely seems to have a kind of construction there. It could be a natural formation of the moon, I don't know, but it looks a bit artificial. Maybe it's something that's made out of lunar rocks and they've carved it into something, whoever they are. There's definitely people that have got an interest in this kind of thing. So, here we go. Even the mainstream newspapers have taken part in it. They've actually claimed there's World War II bombers found on the moon. I mean, I never believed much in the Sunday sport, but I did used to buy it when I was 18. But anyway, I definitely believe there are aliens on the moon. I was first exposed to them as a kid, and that was the most definite proof to me that they did, and that's what set me on this whole course. I definitely have vague memories of seeing aliens on the moon. This is the pictures I remember as a kid. That's what convinced me that there are indeed aliens on the moon. So I believe in aliens on the moon. Do you? Thank you very much indeed for your patience. Thank you. Any hands up for questions? All back up now. Yeah.
Has there been like over 200 bodies carried on the planet since about 2020?
Around Earth, you mean? Oh, these, yeah, that's right. There's last year or the year before, they were discovering these monoliths in various parts. But
that's what appeared in Utah.
yes, Utah. Then it started to spread out, and a few appeared in England. Yeah, and then people sort of mysteriously took them in the night, didn't they?
Yeah.
Made of metal or something. I think it's obviously a big joke. Someone's having a bit of a laugh, some sort of artist maybe, or someone doing it. It's quite intriguing. There's a bit of a craze for it about 2 or 3 months. And a friend of mine actually went in search of one because he found somewhere that one had been put there, and he drove all the way there and found it had been gone by the time he got there, so he was well disappointed. So, yeah, there have to also be the film 2001 has been an inspiration to people with this monolith idea. But they've actually discovered possibly, I wouldn't say definitely, possibly monoliths on one of the moons of Mars. I think it's, I forget the names of them, there's 2 moons of Mars, they're like asteroids. Phobos, something like that, I think it's Phobos. But they actually believe there's a monolith on there that's got to be examined. But again, you're not seeing photographs of that all the time, you know. We hear about it, but you don't necessarily see close-up pictures of it. But Buzz Aldrin is referred to it as well. Any more questions? Oh, 2. There's 2 at once there. Andy's hand went up, then the gentleman. Shall I do the gentleman first? Yeah.
I watched the video just reportedly what was a recording of conversation, and I think it was the Apollo 11, where the commentary went the alien first astronaut to the other one, and she was told our visitors are back, but they I can't remember the actual commentary, but it indicated that they were being watched. And I wonder if you've actually seen that.
I've heard references to something similar. I would have thought that I think the Apollo missions went up into Earth orbit, but I don't think they could get beyond that, to be honest. But I think that if you're going to get up into Earth orbit, I think it's highly probable that UFOs, if they're around, would take an interest in what you're doing, technology-wise, and they could probably, there's been claimed by people in the shuttle they've seen objects, in the International Space Station, where they've seen objects out there. So I would think that man's early exploits are going into space on Apollo missions or Soviet missions. I know that Soviets reported strange things as well. So it will come to surprise me if they've reported seeing things, but still doesn't prove they actually went all the way to the moon, but they've probably seen things in low Earth orbit.
Yes, I think they were camouflaging what they were saying.
Yeah, they say it in a kind of hidden way, don't they, like a security kind of way or something. Yeah, they've probably written it down, something of what they saw, rather than told the whole story. Andy had a question, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, Neil, I mean, you showed the images of the clearly duplicated moon rocks.
Yeah.
Without question, the pigs. Presumably, that is something that has been done in more recent years. Photoshop didn't exist back in the 60s. You could then brush it, but that does look like Photoshop. Are the original images that they claim to be available somewhere in the NASA record? Because, you know, those are clearly official images, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So presumably at some point they did not have those amendments to them. Has anybody gone back and tried to find the original images in the image bank? And if they are missing, that in itself would be an interesting phenomenon.
Mm. Well, I know that the famous Buzz Aldrin photograph, which was used on the Time magazine cover, Man on the Moon, and Buzz Aldrin standing over his watch. I think you told me about this, Marcus, where the original photograph showed him and he was in a hot spot of light, and the rest of the background was very dark behind him. But in later years, when NASA had re-released that image, mysteriously, all the lunar background behind him was all equally lit up as well. And so the accusation was that he was under a small spotlight, but the rest of the light didn't reach the rest of the moon set. And so obviously NASA heard about this claim, so they've tried to doctor it with later images by lighting up the back of the moon set. And I have also heard claims of interviews of people where they were walking past technicians and they said, "Oh, what are you doing there?" And someone said they're with an airbrush or something. "Oh, we're covering up the UFOs on lunar photographs or something, you know, airbrushing them out in some way." And that's, I think it's Donna Hare, she was a UFO person. That's what she claimed she saw. So there definitely seems to be some tampering with these images throughout their lifetime, and especially when Photoshop comes along. I mean, I just found a picture of the Earth in space image about 3 months ago, and it looked like, or was it? No, I think it was the moon. Sorry, a picture of the moon in space. It looked quite genuine. But I took it into Photoshop and I tweaked up the contrast a bit, adjusted it, and I could clearly see an outline of a square that suggested it had been cut out and stuck on an even bigger background. And that was just using Photoshop in a very simple way of adjusting the contrast. And I suggested in one of these Facebook groups, I said, "Oh, I've got a picture of the moon, it looks like it's clearly been cut out." And this guy who's a moon believer said, "Oh, you're clearly lying," you know. I said, "No, I'm not." And I was going to try and come back and challenge him on it, but by the time I came back in the evening to say, "Here's the picture," he had disappeared out of the group, unfortunately, so I couldn't prove my point to him. But it's like they'll admit, they'll just say, "You're lying, dead flat." And you said, "Well, I'm not, I've got the evidence, you know, and here's the link, you can try it yourself." It disappeared before I got a chance. So these things are there to have a look at, but I mean, if you find some of the pictures, there probably are pictures where you find they haven't been adjusted, and they haven't added them. What I find baffling is that why have you got to, okay, I understand you've got to stitch up the picture nicely, but why have you got to duplicate these rocks, you know? It does seem a bit strange. Why have you got to have 2 pigs in space rather than 1? You know, it's a bit weird. And then why have you got these rocks where they look like cookie faces in 2 sets of rocks? It didn't seem necessary. And then there's the other things like the objects. I mean, I found things, I could turn the whole talk into a part of talk, but that'd be for another day. Well, I found like things like pipes on the moon. I found something like a digital watch or a watch hanging off something. Found possibly bits of glass on it. So, there's just so many things that are moon anomalies. I don't trust any of the NASA pictures or many of the NASA pictures. Put it that way. I might believe, say, Jupiter and Saturn and that kind of stuff. That you can send probes out there, but I'm just a bit dubious about this whole moon mission thing, especially when it talks about aliens on the moon, Neil Armstrong has seen aliens on the moon, etc., etc. I think that's a bit of a celebration to make you believe they went there. Most people would just laugh at you if you talk about the moon missions being fake. My dad does, he doesn't understand, but then again, he hasn't looked at the photographs, you see. It's only when you dig down deep and look at these photographs, you start to question, thinking, oh my God, there's something not quite right about it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it, found it interesting, and I'm happy to come back and talk about other stuff like fairies and ghosts and much more down to earth stuff at some future time. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
the information where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.